This podcast has been produced on the traditional lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal peoples. From 2RPH and the Wicking Trust, this is Passing Thoughts. I'm Rob Kaldor. This is the podcast where we investigate death, dying, and everything in between. Getting dementia is something that many of us fear, but sometimes you have to face your fear head on. So today on Passing Thoughts, we're joined by the Senior Australian of the Year, Professor Henry Brodaty, discussing his groundbreaking dementia research and what he hopes to achieve during his year in the spotlight. Jane Mundy takes up the story.
Today in Australia, there are more than 446,000 people who live with dementia, and that figure is expected to double by 2050. Dementia is the leading cause of death for women and the second leading cause for men after heart disease. An estimated 29,000 people live with younger onset dementia, including people in their 50s, 40s, and even sometimes as early as their 30s. The annual cost of dementia to the Australian economy is $18.7 billion in direct and indirect costs, representing almost 1% of GDP. Talking with me today is dementia icon Professor Henry Brodaty. Professor Brodaty's CV is dazzling, spanning almost 5 decades as a clinician, researcher, policy advisor and advocate. Past president of the International Psychogeriatric Association and former chair of Alzheimer's Disease International, Professor Brodaty is the co-founder of the Centre for Healthy Brain Ageing at the University of New South Wales, and to top it off, he's also recently been named the 2026 Senior Australian of the Year. His life's work offers hope, dignity, and a healthier future for people living with the disease, as well as their carers. It's a great privilege to have you with us today, Professor.
Jane, thanks very much.
I'm sure you have a busy year ahead of you, right?
It's been incredible. It hasn't stopped since I got the award, and the pace just keeps growing, yes.
The award honours your work, but I'm guessing it's also an amazing recognition of the fact that dementia's well and truly come out from the shadows, and it's now something to be talked about openly and also in a positive way. Is that the way you see it?
It also provides a platform for me to advocate for some things we can do to prevent dementia or look after people with dementia better as well.
It's also an acknowledgement that dementia can affect anyone.
In a speech I gave a few weeks ago, I said, dementia is a very democratic disease. Rich, poor, whatever religion you are, whatever state you live in, whatever a country you live in, anyone can get dementia, and a lot of people will. If we live long enough, probably a third of us will.
I guess a difficult area in some ways to work in because, you're seeing numbers going up all the time.
Numbers are going up because we're getting older. But if you look at the incidence, number of new cases per 1,000 population in each age group, in fact, they're not going up. So if we weren't aging, we might have a decrease in the numbers of people with dementia. It's something called incidence. The incidence of dementia is going down. The prevalence, the numbers of people affected, are going up. And that's because aging is trumping any reduction in new cases per 1,000 in each age group, which may be attributable to the fact we're not smoking as much, we're looking after our blood pressure and heart disease better. And that may be the reason the number of new cases per 1,000 population for each age group is decreasing. But overall, the numbers are rising. And as you said, there'd be about 1 million people in Australia. Around the world, there's about 55 million people with dementia.
First, can I take you back to the early 70s and to your father, Jacob? Jacob is the person really who has motivated your life's work, isn't he?
He was a very clever man, very bright man. His life was interrupted by World War II, as it was for most people. And he and his new wife escaped from Poland, going east to Russia and with labor camps. And when they returned to Poland, there was no one there. And so they were sort of scooped up by the Red Cross and in a displaced persons camp in Germany for some time when I came along. I was born there and eventually got to Australia in 1948. I was 13 months old. So for those of you trying to do the maths, I'm 78. So there we go. He got it at the age of 52. He was an A-grade chess player. He was a key bridge player. he was a clever man who didn't have the benefits of a higher education because he just finished high school when the war broke out. And to see him diminished in the way it was and unable to manage his business, which he had to sell, eventually being dependent on others to help him with his day-to-day care, it was really sad. He died at 59 in 1979, and he died of a heart attack. He had had his first heart attack at 52, and at the age of 53, he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and died at 59. And it really rocked me. I didn't realize how much till my wife told me how difficult I'd been for the year after that.
Can only imagine that having a parent or a dear person go through that at any age must rock you.
You know, so little was known about dementia generally, or Alzheimer's in particular at that time. And it was called pre-senile dementia because everyone over 65 who developed dementia, they just called senile dementia. They didn't realize that if you looked at the brains, did pathology on them, the Alzheimer changes that were seen in the pre-senile dementias were the same. And suddenly senile dementia had a different name and it became known as, well, the major cause was Alzheimer's because Alzheimer's accounts for over half the cases of dementia.
So your father's condition would now be called early onset dementia, would it?
Young onset dementia.
How did it impact you when your dad became unwell?
I think it was 1973 when the diagnosis was made. I sent him off to a neurologist and he confirmed that he made that diagnosis. And that was the year I'd gone to London to start my psychiatry training. I finished my physician training and I decided I wanted to do psychiatry. So I was in London for a year and a half, actually. But we came back early because of my father. You mentioned my mother. As they say, like he has dementia, they all suffer with it because the burden is very much on the family.
And I imagine in those days that wasn't so much recognized, right? It was not, the impact on the whole family was not so much recognized.
That's what led me, I started getting patients. First, people heard about that my father had it and they thought I might be more understanding. And one of my patients had a son who was living in St. Louis in the United States, in Missouri, and he sent me some information about the Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders Association, which had started about a year or two beforehand in the US. And I thought, that's what we need. I thought I was doing it for my mother, actually, because she didn't really have any supports. But in retrospect, it really was for both of them. And so in 1981, I got together with a few people and we approached the New South Wales Mental Health Association, and they supported our move to set up an association for people with dementia and their families. And they gave us social worker, Faye, who came with us for 2 days a week for a few months. And we had a public meeting in May, I remember May 1982, at the Teachers Federation in Sussex Street, Sydney. 500 people came along to that. We managed to work the media, so we got some publicity about it. And at that meeting, we decided to form the Alzheimer's Disease and Related Disorders Society, and ADARDS was the acronym. And we formed it. It was a New South Wales thing. And we had 2 branches, one in the north of the harbour, one in the south of the harbour. And eventually that grew and grew. And over the next couple of years, each of the other states did the same thing. And by 1984, we all got together and established Dementia Australia, what it was then called Alzheimer's Disease Related Disorder Society Australia, then became Alzheimer's Australia, then Dementia Australia. And that's now a huge operation and does a wonderful work and has wonderful information on its website if people are interested.
And I guess that name change also reflects the understanding that dementia actually covers a great many manifestations, doesn't it?
Dementia is the umbrella term. There are many, many causes. Alzheimer's is the most common. And there are the big 4, as it were. Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, which is problems with circulation in the brain, small strokes or big strokes or hemorrhages. Lewy body dementia, one that Robin Williams died with, the actor and comedian. And frontotemporal dementia, one that Bruce Willis has now. They account for well over 90% of all the dementias. And there are new dementias being described by the neuropathologists. looking at people who died under the microscope, looking at their brain structure. And we now often know that there are many other sorts. There are over 100 different types of dementia.
It sounds like your dad and the terrible disease that he got, in fact, was a great gift to you.
I didn't know it at the time, but I would not have gone into this area. I was mainly interested in depression. We were setting up a mood disorders unit at Prince Henry Hospital in Sydney, and which later became the Black Dog Institute.
Can I take you back again to the 70s and the early part of your career? Old age psychiatry, I think that's what it was called then. It was very, very different from what it is now, wasn't it? Can you tell me something about how it was in the 70s?
We had child psychiatry, but no one worried about older people. It's part of the ageism that's prevalent in our community. So understandably, you certainly want to focus on children, and because they've got the whole lives ahead of them. But nowadays, as we're living longer and longer, a third of our lives could be post-retirement. The average lifespan now is in our 80s. For men, it's in the low 80s, and for women, it's in the mid to high 80s. In 100 years, between 1900 and 2000, we gained at a population level 3 months per year of lifespan. So 25 years out of 100 years, over 100 years, we gained in lifespan. So instead of people dying in their 50s or early 60s, they were now dying in their 80s. And we're still increasing our lifespan.
I guess back in the 70s, there was no recognition of, let's call it old age psychiatry, as a specialty.
No, it didn't exist. I was the first, well, there were two of us appointed about the same time, professor of old age psychiatry, and that was in 1990. In the UK, they were 10 years ahead of us in that respect. They had some pioneers in old age psychiatry there. But in Australia, we only got recognized we didn't even get recognized as subspecialty then. It took another few years before the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists actually established a faculty of old age psychiatry. And now people have to do 2 years of advanced training to become qualified as an old age psychiatrist.
And I believe back in the day, dementia was included in the Mental Health Act. And so it was seen as a kind of madness.
In 1981, Justice Powell, I appeared in this case, said dementia was not a mental illness. It was mental infirmity. Suddenly, all the people with dementia who were in the large psychiatric asylums were no longer able to be kept there because it wasn't the mental illness.
Has the fact that it's now being considered as a disease, has that made a difference in the way that the medical profession and also, I guess, the community sees dementia?
It certainly has made a huge difference. There is an International Alzheimer's Association conference run by the US, either in North America or Europe. This year it's going to be in London in July. There'll be 10,000 people at that conference. There'll be 2,000 pieces of new research presented at that conference. It's huge. The amount of money that's being invested. See, with the numbers, there are 55 million people in the world. Imagine if you ran a drug company and you had a drug that would cure Alzheimer's disease or prevent it or even reduce it. The profits you could make would be huge.
As we've said, dementia has come out from the shadows to some extent. I guess it's also something that we all fear, isn't it? It's a feared disease. It's what old people dread.
It's the most feared condition in the population, more than cancer. It's understandable, I think. People think, I don't want to lose my independence, my autonomy. I don't want to be dependent on others. I don't want to be at a stage where I can't recognize my own family. And people say they would rather end their life rather than be that end-stage dementia. And there's a big gap that people, I don't think, really appreciate, that from a diagnosis to being in that end-stage disease, there are many years people can live very positively with a good quality of life. And that's one of the things that we're trying to promote, post-diagnostic care.
I want to talk to you in a moment about your Maintain Your Brain initiative, which is very much about that, isn't it?
That's more about prevention of dementia. So keeping brains healthier for longer.
There's also, I'm sure, working within the area of dementia, it can become very challenging, but there's also a lighter side to dementia, isn't there? And I wonder whether you'd like to tell us the story about a certain Prime Minister and the lady in the nursing home.
The story is about Paul Keating, but I think it's apocryphal. It could be any prime minister. That he was doing the electioneering and he was going to a nursing home and he was kneeling down to talk to the people sitting in their chairs. And he went up to a little old lady and said, "Hello, how are you? Do you know who I am?" And she looked at him thoughtfully and then said, "No, but if you go and ask the nurse at the station, they will tell you who you are." Yeah. So that was that story. People ask me, how can I work in this area? It must be so depressing. It's actually quite rewarding. There's much we can do to help people live positively, to help their families, to work out ways to solve issues as they come up.
Can you see a cure on the horizon?
As I said, 100 different causes. So we can't talk about a cure for dementia. We have to look at each particular type of dementia. And the types are defined by the pathology, what's going wrong in the brain. We all build up some pathology in our brains as we get older. Everyone will have perhaps some vascular changes, maybe some deposition of the toxic protein that is what is behind Alzheimer's disease, or the toxic protein that's behind Lewy body dementia, or some scarring of the brain. So unfortunately, we all have some of that. Depends on the amount before it presents as symptoms. And also depends on the buffer we have against the pathology. So for example, if people have a good education, have been using their brains a lot, they build up something called cognitive reserve. It's a buffer. And so they can still manage to live normally, even though they have some pathology in their brain. See, just think about it. When you get the flu, well, I get the flu, we're not thinking 100%. We're a bit dull in our thinking, we're a bit slower, we feel under the weather, but we can still manage. We can work. We probably shouldn't, but I do, and I often continue to work quite well because we have enough reserve to be able to cope with that. But if part of your brain is damaged, then your capacity to cope with further damage is reduced. And that's why building up cognitive reserve and brain reserve, which is not just your ability to make the nerve cells work better, but also the amount of nerve cells you have in the brain, can help.
And that's really the philosophy behind the Maintain Your Brain initiative, isn't it?
100%. We were trying to delay the onset of dementia, hopefully prevent it. Because if we can delay it for a few years, then, of course, if we could delay it till after we die, that would be ideal, then none of us would get dementia. So for every year we can delay it, there's 10% fewer cases. We tackled 4 of the risk factors. We tackled physical inactivity, a diet that wasn't particularly healthy, brain training on computers, and depression, anxiety treatment. So we had 4 modules. And in year 1, people in our study would do one of these modules in any random order of physical activity, eating a diet which is more like the Mediterranean diet, rich in vegetables, legumes, extra virgin olive oil, walnuts, almonds, moderate amounts of fish, some amounts of dairy and lesser amounts of red meat and sweets, and less saturated fats, and trying to avoid ultra-processed foods. The other thing was a brain training program. This was a program developed in Germany that we've been working with, a company called NeuroNation, which is available. It's a commercial product, but in Germany, I think about 30 million people are using it, subsidized by the German government. And we know depression or anxiety is also a risk factor for dementia. And so we did everything online. We had 6,000 people in the study. 3,000 people got quite a lot of coaching, intense coaching in year 1. And then boosters every month in each of the modules they did until the end of year 3. The control group got information about each of those modules, and we tailored it to their risk factors for both of them. At the end of year 3, these were 55 to 77-year-olds living in the community. And we worked with the Sachs Institute, who lead the 45 and up study. And we invited almost 100,000 people from that study. We ended up with 6,104 who agreed and met our criteria. And we randomized them in those 2 groups. So both groups improved. The people who got information improved. The people who got coaching improved almost 3 times as much. These were 55 to 77-year-olds. So you don't expect cognition to improve at that age. And we then look at the costing, how much it cost to run the trial. We looked at the health costs those people had over those 3 years. Doctor visits, medications on the PBS, emergency department presentations, hospitalizations, and the program paid for itself. That was with 6,000 people. If we did it with 600,000 people or 6 million people, we'd be saving millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars over time. So that was our program, and that's one of my main goals as Senior Australian of the Year, to see if I can convince government to run a healthy brain promotion program. Australia has been so successful with prevention. Think about skin cancer, the slap program. Smoking reduction, we've been leaders in that too. So I think it's now prime time for us to start looking at healthy brain promotion, and not starting at 55. In our proposal, we're looking at starting at 45. And the earlier they start, the better. And people think, I'm not going to get dementia. Why should I worry about this? Well, they've got a 1 in 3 chance of getting it. And people think, well, I worry about that when I'm older. Wrong. Worry about it now and start living healthily.
Another of your initiatives that dovetails into this is the tool that you designed, I think back in 1985, a GP assessment of cognition tool, so that GPs could recognise and diagnose dementia as early as possible, which then enables them to lock into something like Maintain the Brain so that they can continue functioning as well as possible for as long as possible.
We did a survey, which we published in 1990, asking people who belonged to the Alzheimer's Association, as it was then, what was their experience? And they said they got no information. No one told them how to cope. No one told them what to do. And they felt lost. We did a similar survey about 5 years ago to see exactly the same. So we then asked GPs, what are the issues? Why are you not making diagnoses? Is it because of the time, because of lack of knowledge? Is it the stigma? And they said, well, it takes too long. And so we designed a tool, which is just a simple screening tool, takes about 4 minutes, that the GPs could use. We call it GP Cog. And we showed that it was equivalent to the current screening tool that people are using called the mini mental state, probably slightly better, not significantly so statistically, but certainly at least as good, and got good results. So that GP Cog has now been translated into about 20 languages. In Italy, I think it's now recommended as a tool for primary care physicians. In the US, it's one of the tools that's recommended there as well. You know, we tried to help GPs. We did a training program for GPs. We reached about 5,000 GPs in Australia in conjunction with Dementia Australia and La Trobe University. There are a number of reasons people weren't getting diagnosis. It was the stigma. They were afraid. They didn't go and see their doctors. The GPs were not skilled or didn't feel confident enough to make the diagnosis, or felt, what's the point? There's nothing I can do, which is absolutely wrong. And so we tried to tackle each of those problems.
I imagine that the point that you mentioned about burying your head in the sand kind of thing, isn't it? That often it's friends and family who may notice the first symptoms, and then there's going back to a real fear that, gosh, this could be dementia and I think I'd rather not know. But it's counterintuitive, isn't it? Because as you've shown with your Maintain the Brain program, the earlier that you can, retrain your brain and work on that multidisciplinary approach that you have, then the better the outcome is longer term, right?
And also, it's rare, but there are some cases of dementia which are reversible. Could be caused by a low vitamin B12 level or low thyroid level, or a tumor, or increased pressure of fluid in the brain, something called normal pressure hydrocephalus. So it's worthwhile, if people are worried about it, having an assessment.
Being Senior Australian of the Year is giving you a bit of an ear to government, encouraging them to use the Maintain the Brain results and implementing a program for a sort of comprehensive brain training program and diet and all of those elements you've mentioned. What else will you be wanting to say to government?
I do have a meeting that's been booked with Minister Mark Butler and Sam Ray, the Minister for Ageing. So I'm really looking forward to that. The two main things are having a healthy brain promotion campaign across the country. And the other thing is about post-diagnostic care. One of the ways we can improve that, I mentioned the void people feel after they get a diagnosis, no help, not knowing what to do. When women get breast cancer, they have the McGrath nurses come and talk to them, advise them, make sure they're okay. And they're like the navigators about how to cope with it, what's happening and what to do next. And so dementia navigators have been introduced in some countries, and we're looking to do that in Australia as well. Some areas have dementia navigators as part of it, and we've done some economic modelling with Dementia Australia, and we show that investment in dementia navigators could actually save money. It's worthwhile. So it's a matter of who will take responsibility, the old conundrum, state or Commonwealth, and let's get it going. Start with a few areas of pilots, show that it actually does save the money that we found on modelling.
That economic argument that it's going to save money is a very compelling one to government.
Well, that is the way to convince government. The problem is government's only in for 3 years, and sometimes the payoff might take 4 years or 5 years.
Thanks to Professor Henry Brodaty. We look forward to the positive outcome of him being Senior Australian of the Year. And thanks to Jane Mundy for bringing us this chat. Before we go, we're halfway through our second series of Passing Thoughts, and we still get some pretty unexpected reactions when we tell people what the podcast is about. So I thought I'd touch base with Jane Mundy after her conversation with Henry Brodaty.
I was incredibly, almost humbled to speak to Henry Brodaty. He's been a bit of a pin-up boy of mine for decades, really. I've worked with him to a minor degree back in the 90s. The topic, of course, dementia is something we all fear as we get older. None of us wants to get that. It's up there in a lot of people's minds with motor neurone disease and conditions like that. It's more normalised. It's in the medical profession, it's been brought out from the shadows and is a mainstream kind of specialty. And going along with that is a lot of research that's given a lot of hope in the field.
Do you personally have a fear of dementia?
I think I do. I think in contrast to physical conditions that might bring about our demise, I think losing our capacity to think, especially for people who have used their brains, is a very scary thing. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't something that I think about. I don't like to see friends, you know, succumbing, and you feel quite helpless as a friend and you know, maybe in some cases a carer. It's a really difficult position to be in if your partner has dementia, and particularly when they have personality changes involved in that. Very challenging.
Are you doing anything to mitigate against it?
Funnily enough, I did take part in that Maintain Your Brain trial. I do look after my diet and I do try and keep my brain a bit active, and I do try and socialise and those kinds of things. Keeping active is terribly important.
Being part of this podcast, has it changed your thoughts and perception of the final chapter in life?
At times I've found it confronting to delve into some of the issues of, you know, as we call it, the final chapters, because it does make you realise that you're either in or fast approaching the final chapters yourself. It's confronting when you acknowledge that you've only got a little bit of your life left. And I guess being part of this program's focused my attention on that fact.
Passing Thoughts is made with the support of the Wicking Trust and the team from Radio 2RPH, with special thanks to Marty, Veronica and the station manager Barry. If you've got feedback, topic suggestions, or just want to share your own experiences, you can email us passingthoughts@2rph.org.au. Don't forget to rate and review Passing Thoughts. It helps others find the show.
This is a Radio 2RPH production.